Hello there, welcome back to Strive's Talking Points, and I'm going to go through a story that I find pretty interesting, and it is this whole debacle over men's soccer versus women's soccer, FIFA, the whole thing with equal pay as it breaks down. Now, what you have essentially is one organization, let's just call it FIFA, running two separate tournaments and then paying players and groups out of those tournaments, and that whole idea of two separate things being made equal, and then you're saying, hey, pay them equal. And I just find this whole thing very interesting. It's a lot of stuff to go through. I've actually gone through about 15 stories, and I'm just going to go through a couple of pieces of 5 of them just to kind of make some points about the good and the bad about this whole thing. I'm going to begin here. This is just straight up Yahoo Sports. Senator introduces bill halting funding for the 2026 World Cup until U.S. women's national team gets equal pay. Now, first off, I didn't realize the U.S. government paid for these teams. I find that very distressing. Unprofessional athletes and stuff that want to compete in the Olympics, pay them. Professional athletes who are going to go in World Cup, I don't believe the U.S. should pay them, men's or women's. I think that should be, the whole thing about World Cup professional sports is those people are professionals and they should kind of do it on their own. Maybe have some type of government oversight, but I don't really think we should pay professional athletes to pay the sport they're playing professionally. Doesn't make sense to me. Joe Manchin, a Democratic senator from West Virginia, introduced a bill Tuesday proposing to halt federal funding for the 2026 World Cup, which will be hosted by the U.S., Mexico, and Canada until the U.S. Soccer Federation agrees to provide equitable pay to both U.S. men's and women's teams. Now, men's and women's soccer are separate entities, ran kind of in a joint association. The bill calls for cutting off any federal money that would go toward efforts for hosting the 2026 World Cup, including funds distributed to host cities, participating local and state organizations, the U.S. Soccer Federation, CONCACAF, and FIFA. Manchin, who said the issue was brought to his attention by West Virginia University coach Nikki Izzo Brown, said the fact that women's team members are paid less than men is plain wrong. Now, in sports, and this is generally in all sports, all competitive sports that I know of, save maybe gymnastics, which I don't know how gymnasts and people like that get paid overall. When you look at basketball, football, soccer, football, whatever you want to call it, baseball versus softball, all these various men's and women's sports. Typically, you'll see the men's leagues, and I think this is most evident with the NBA. The men's league, NBA, actually basically subsidizes the existence of the female league, the WNBA. It does this by taking direct profits from the NBA to pay the female players. There's lots of stories on this. You can find it all over ESPN and all over these various news sites. Because the women's sport generates a significant less amount of money than the men's sport does. And what you see in soccer, football, whatever you want to call it, the same trend applies. The bill he's calling for to level the playing field for all. Now, there is almost no way this is going to level the playing field. Basically, what they're saying is the government, the taxpayer, we will pay extra money for professional athletes to play a sport. That's the gist that I've gotten from all of this. Here's another quote. The clear, unequitable pay between the U.S. men's and women's soccer team is unacceptable, and I'm glad the U.S. women's soccer team latest victory is causing public outcry. They are the best in the world and deserve to be paid accordingly. Now, is there a breakdown between how the U.S. women's team is paid versus how, let's say, the Netherlands, France, the English team, the Brazilian team, the Taiwanese team, is that the breakdown they're trying to go for? In this league, are they paid better than the others? And really, it's very difficult to find any information on that. That's what I've been looking for while I'm going through so many articles trying to find, is how exactly the other groups are paid. Not a lot of information out there. What they're doing, though, in the lawsuit, the U.S. players who make far much less than the much less successful men's team. Now, by successful, they're talking about wins and losses. Now, if you look at how professional sports teams, you can have an extremely popular team, which does very poorly, still makes a lot of money because butts in the seat, purchasing of merchandise, all those things, generation of a fan base will generate the money. It's not always tied, to my knowledge, it's not tied to wins and losses. I personally am not a huge sports fan. I've watched the Dallas Cowboys football team for most of my entire life because I grew up in an area where there are no close football teams. For a period of time, I lived in Tennessee, and I tried to watch the Tennessee Titans play. It was okay. Lived in Tennessee, saw the Grizzlies play, even watched a little hockey back in the day. Never a huge sports fan, but I do know that teams' popularity isn't necessarily, and the money they make isn't always tied to their ability to win. It is tied to the fan base, to how excitement grows around the team and how people respond and respect the team. The lawsuit cites an array of issues, including larger bonuses received by the men's team and the differences in treatment, such as travel, accommodations, and promotions the two teams received from U.S. Soccer. Throughout the latest run to the World Cup crown, the players have not hesitated to be outspoken about the issue, while also continually calling out FIFA for not investing in the women's game the same way it does the men's product. Now, we're going to kind of drop that there. Remember, this has only been about 2 or 3 days since the win, and there's already a senator ready to introduce a bill to do this. And I found, get rid of that story, I found this whole thing just insane. Now, here is a story from City Pages. Now, I have to be honest, this is the first time I've ever seen City Pages. I read this story and it was good enough. Rep Pat Garofalo claims women's soccer teams' lower pay isn't sexism, it's math. And I'm going to skip down a little bit, and I just want to show you this one image, this tweet. Men's Soccer Cup world revenue over $6 billion. FIFA made $6 billion off the Men's World Cup. Women's Soccer World Cup revenue, $131 million. The men's teams were given a bonus to the players. This is the people participating in FIFA, in the World Cup for the men. Their bonus given to players was $400 million. Huge pay for a player there. I believe the winning team was given, X millions more, but that's it. Women's soccer, the entire thing, the revenue for FIFA was $131 million, and they were given roughly, I believe, $38 million to the women's teams. And here's some other information they're going back and forth about. For example, Wall Street Journal found that between 2016 and 2018, U.S. women's games made a little bit more than the men's games. $50.8 million versus $49.9. Plus, Nike executive Mark Parker said the women's home jersey has become the #1 soccer jersey, men or women's, ever sold on Nike.com in one season. Now, is Nike going to dump the same amount of endorsement money into the women's league that they dump into the MLS league? Probably not. Does this have anything to do with how the government should pay them? No, this is how the teams should operate, how the teams should pay them, not You and I and everybody out there listening who pays taxes, we shouldn't have to fund extra money to these teams. I don't see it as necessary. If they're making more money, and if the Nike jersey should be paying some type of kickback revenue share with the women's teams, great. Give them that money. Let them divide it out accordingly. Now, it says on Nike.com in one season, but I wonder what the actual total jersey sales would be and why they don't tell you, men's jerseys sell 30 million, women's jerseys sell 40 million. Just tell us what the actual numbers are as far as sales, because that goes back into revenue, not for the players, but for the team. Because if you have a team jersey, that pays directly to the team. Individual jerseys, I believe, are always licensed to the player, and the player gets to kick back off that. Anyway, with shouts of equal pay echoing from the stands, fans are increasingly coming to value the skill and showmanship women are able to bring to the table, as are the players themselves. Great. Generate a fan base, generate more money through advertisements, through viewership, through all these things that have always traditionally been how you build fan bases for sports teams. I don't think the government should step in and say, no, we're going to force FIFA to give a $400 million bonus to the women when it only made $131 million in total revenue. Keep in mind, not profit, revenue. Revenue. He says retractions to the comment have been typically extreme for Twitter. Either people are saying Pat Garofalo is awesome because he agrees with me, or Pat Garofalo is the worst human being ever and is a white misogynist pig. That's Twitter. I really do think Twitter as a place should be shut down. Because it is just the most insane thing. And here, I also went through this here, the big think. This is talking about the overall, what explains the pay gap in women's soccer. Let's scroll down here because there is a class action lawsuit now out. Generally, the men's national team, I believe, is paid on a bonus system, not an actual salary. The women get a salary and then go through. Again, that is all tied up in there. And they go, here again, Big Think has this piece here from 2016, 2018. The women's generated about $50 million in revenue compared to the 49 for the men's. If you are in a foreign country, the biggest thing you should know about the U.S. is we are not huge soccer fans. Football, whatever you want to call it. We like American football. We like basketball. We like baseball. You can look at any of those sports and you'll see the revenue is skyrocketing. I believe most teams would generate more in viewership revenue than that. The entire league did. Here we go. Collective bargaining. In short, while comparing earnings between male and female players, it's complicated, and a one-to-one comparison is impossible. For 2019, it looks like the women's team will earn more than the men's team, but only because of their extraordinary success and the men's team's relative failure. Not making it to a World Cup championship is a failure, even though only one team does it every 4 years. So in this instance, the women's team is going to make more than the men's team. So thereby, the men's team is being paid too little? I don't know. But here's where we run into the real issue, the World Cup. FIFA runs the World Cup. It determines how much prize money the winning nation's team receives, and after that team wins the World Cup, FIFA awards a predetermined purse of prize money to that nation's soccer federation. But those purses vary drastically by gender. Now, they're saying gender, they should say sport. A men's sport and a women's sport are different sports, it's not sexist. You could throw women onto the men's team, you could throw men onto the women's team, but then you'd end up with two men's teams. Total prize money for the Women's World Cup in 2019 is $30 million. The champions walk away with about $4 million. Not bad for a team. For contrast, in 2018 Men's World Cup, the champions won $38 million from a total pool of $400 million. Now keep in mind, they go through it down here, For context, FIFA earned upwards of $6 billion in 2018 from the Men's World Cup. Meanwhile, the Women's 2019 World Cup is estimated to earn FIFA $131 million. One of them earns almost 50 times what the other one does. Not 5 times, 50. 50 times the revenue from the Men's Cup versus the Women's Cup. So you start to see the difference there in how they're being paid. And unless there is some type of breakdown, and it's very difficult to find. I went through here and looked at the actual versions of the salaries. Here is from heavy.com. The U.S. soccer team salaries vary across U.S. women's and men's team. Goalkeeper Ashlyn Harris told the New York Times she expected to earn between $300,000 and $400,000 in 2019. I would say $400,000 for being a goalkeeper is great. You're a professional athlete making a mid-range six-figure salary. Now, does she include the whole idea of endorsements? Is that something they're talking about as well, or is this just actual salary? An anonymous player noted her annual earnings were much less at $165,000. Now, in every sport, and I mean every sport, there is a baseline minimum that if you're in the sport, this is what you get paid. So if you're the third string bench warming guy, never has touched the grass except during practice, and you make it on the roster by the skin of your teeth every year, you get paid a certain amount of money. That could possibly be that person who just gets on there a few times and gets a bonus because maybe they do get some game time here and there, and that's where you come from. Lunabar donated $718,000 to the U.S. women's team, which made up the $31,250 per player difference between the men's and women's roster bonuses for making the World Cup. So now there's a donation, and now they say the difference is Lunabar donated the extra money, so the women got more bonuses for making the roster. Yeah, see, this is the most convoluted, crazy thing. These are sports teams getting paid through advertising revenue, share from television, endorsements, advertisers, bonuses, money from FIFA. There's 100 different ways to go. And this is just crazy that it's all being tied back to sexism, and that's what it's got to be, because these people make in different sports, playing for different organizations, completely separate entities, but because they roll under this huge umbrella of FIFA, which isn't, what I would really think you're going to see in the next few years is if the women's team is going to start being paid exactly the same as the men's team, I would expect slowly but surely you'll start seeing some of these teams fold, because better players will move to these teams which have the extra money to pay them their traditional money. U.S. women's national team members claimed in a recent lawsuit that their maximum salary in a typical year is $99,000. Well, this lady here says she made $167,000. This was saying $400,000. If the team played and won 20 exhibition matchups per goal.com. I went there and tried to look this up. It's very difficult to find information. Given the same circumstances, the men's team would earn $263,320, $13,000 per game, the lawsuit states. The big discrepancy is between National Women's Soccer and Major League Soccer. The minimum salary for women's is $16,000, while the maximum salary is $42,000 per game, I'm assuming. Weekly reported in 2016 in the U.S. Women's National Team can have a higher max salary of $56,000, and the number has likely gone up. So now they're going to break it down and go into how different sports pay. MLS has received minimum salary $56,000 and a senior minimum of $70,000, because it's a different league. You can't play in the minor leagues and expect to be paid the same as if you're playing for the New York Yankees. If you're a starting shortstop on your local team there playing AAA ball, you're not going to earn what a Major League Baseball player is. And even between the teams, the salaries are all over the place. Even on the same team, salaries are everywhere. Salaries for the top U.S. men's team players are much higher, as Michael Bradley makes $6 million base. What does that have to do with anything? This is the base he gets from the team he plays for. So you can't take the money he makes on this and say there. Now, if he takes a little more money to bring him into your league because you want him to play for you, then you have to pay more for a more expensive player. That's reality. In sports, athletes get paid more along the lines of what they earn. And if a player is making $6 million, you're not going to bring him on for 20 games, paying him $5,000 a game. Maybe he wants to play for his country, maybe he doesn't. To me, not worth the risk to break my leg, tear out my knee, ankles, injury, period, to do that. To play in the top international leagues, the money is even more lucrative. And they go to Chelsea, where you see foreign players making $73 million to sign Christian Pulisic, I don't know who that is, for an American soccer player ever, per NPR, while Chelsea has not disclosed actual salary, makes about $3 million. So, yeah. There you go. Players in different sports, in different leagues, playing on different teams, make different money. But now the U.S. government, the Senate, is going to try and oversee how FIFA pays players and this whole mess. And because our government functions so well, I assume this is going to be a massive mess of a deal. Because they're trying to take into account all these outside factors. If the U.S. wants to say that we, as a country, as a U.S. national teams, will pay the men $5,000 a game, $10,000 a game, $20,000 a game, then we should pay the women $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 a game. That's fine. But the U.S. trying to say, hey, FIFA, hey, entire world, you're not respecting women enough, and you should put $6 billion worth of revenue into the women's league, the same way that $6 billion worth of revenue came into the men's league. I don't see that happening. And that's it. If you're a professional athlete, I think you should be paid by the team, and you should negotiate your own value and not have the government step in and say, oh, you can't do that, or that's sexist. Because if no one is interested, no one watches sports, they don't buy your jerseys, it doesn't matter. People watch what they want to watch. People put their money into what they want to put their money into. I watched a handful of World Cup games a few years ago. I guess it wasn't in the last World Cup. It had been in the one before that. And this year we watched, while the World Cup was going on, I believe there was a Caribbean Cup going. We're in a Mexican restaurant. My son and I watched a soccer game. We would watch a little bit of the women's and flip back over and watch. I can't remember what the teams were, but it was kind of interesting to see. Not a huge fan. Don't really know the rules. But hey, I'm not the greatest sports fan. So please like, share, comment. Let me know what you guys think. Should FIFA be forced to dump $400 million and lose a couple $100 million in revenue? Should the U.S. Soccer Federation, MLS, and the Women's MLS break down and use exactly the same money to pay for the teams? Should every player be paid a basic subsistence wage where no one makes more than anyone else? What do you guys think? I think with sports, we're splitting hairs trying to decide what's right, what's wrong. Overall, oh my God, 25 minutes. Thank you all for listening. I'm sorry I ranted for so long, but have a great day.